I'm very, very honored to be showing here and showing some new pieces. A little different than what I used to paint, maybe, or what I was known for. When I first came out here, it was the big skies and the horizons and the things that kids from the suburbs don't normally see. And I painted that for a while, and which is kind of an ironic situation, because here I was new to this whole thing, and I'm painting this and I'm displaying it to people who've lived here all their lives. So, kind of interesting situation. But now, owing to various circumstances and owing to just living here all this time, my gaze has come down from the skies and out into the distance, and I'm kind of looking at all those things that I would normally look at in, going about your business day to day, just around here. So here they are. I'm working in watercolor now. It's mainly because it's a medium that you have to be present with it and work rather quickly, and that sort of suits my time that I have to work these days. So I'm in the alleys here in Fairfield. The Iowa State Bank, which when I first moved here, I thought, well, let's go put our money in that bank because they have the coolest building. The old Art Deco building. So, and that is where, right probably back behind there, where I first encountered the work of Wendell Moore. And it was like an aerial view of the kind of the industrial part of the west end of town there. It was just stunning. This one is from last month's art walk, and I was coming from here going down towards Icon to see that show, and there was this kind of amazing cloud, and there were all these birds up on the wire in the little alley between the Landmark Hotel and whatever the next building south is there. And let's see, I was staring at it, and someone came through here, and they noticed me noticing that. So I at home, I had a piece of paper that had just been kind of washed in oranges and yellows and blues and stuff, and I thought, hey, that looks like that, So I superimposed the buildings and the birds on top of that. Next, we have the Bentonsport Bridge. That was painted during the Van Buren County Plein Air event. I remember, Cindy remembers, there was a time when you could still drive across that, and that would have been like 86, maybe, or something. It's a footbridge now, if you've ever been down there. She was howling and screaming because as you drove across it, the boards would would fly. So a very near and dear place to me. Next, we have a barge going down the Mississippi. I'm totally fascinated with those things. I don't know why. They're just so huge and almost the size of an aircraft carrier, but less than a half a dozen people crewing it. And how in the world they manage to stop that once they get all that momentum going just amazes me. This one with the sheep, I wanted to have something in here that is from the Wednesday Live little tutorials that I do on Facebook. And this was one that I did back when we were all locked up in the house. And we used to raise sheep, Cindy and I. And unfortunately, we never took very many pictures of them. So this one I had to harvest from elsewhere. I tried to find one that had the same breed that we had, the Rambouillet white ones. The next one, which is just some pine trees there probably means nothing to anyone, but other than me, because I was there in East Lake Park in Mount Pleasant, painting with other friends. Catherine, you might have been there that day.
I think so.
Yeah. And we just, we plein air painters, we get together and we find a place to go and we just set up and we just have at it. And it's, like I say, it probably means nothing to anyone, but to if you're there and you're painting, you remember the day you had and the fun with your friends. So the next one is from that same COVID time period. That's my backyard, our windbreak on the north side of the house. So couldn't really go anywhere, so I just went out in the yard and painted. The next one is from this poor tired gentleman crossing the street. I saw that at a plein air event in Hannibal. He was, when you get done with your work, you hang it up and the judges are judging it. And then, the artists are just sort of hanging around on the street, sketching and talking or, whatever. So I saw this guy and I did a quick sketch of that and made a picture after the fact. The next two are from a plein air event in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. They're the upper end of the first one is the upper end of the street. It's very hilly there. Interesting place. A lot of Cornish miners emigrated there, and they worked lead mines, and I guess they were used
copper mines.
Copper mines, yeah. And so again, this one here, again, this was done quickly while we were waiting for the work is hung and the judges are doing their judging, and we're all out on the street trying to find something to do during that time. The other one was done earlier, and that's the bottom of the street. The next one, this winter one, is a little bridge in Jefferson County Park, which I did from a photo by a friend of mine, Joe Stansky, marvelous photographer, and he gave me permission to work from that, and he's been in Iowa magazine, and he just terrific photographs. The one after that is from Waterworks Park in Des Moines in winter. And the very last one, the compost pile, which is kind of a favorite of mine. Again, another plein air event. This one was in Amana. They have a plein air event around Labor Day. And this was the quick paint contest where they've got a lot of artists in a very small area, about the size of the area we're in here. It's behind the gallery. And you have 2 hours to find something interesting and paint it. And I got there a bit late because I was framing stuff. And pretty much all of the good stuff was taken. So I looked at that compost pile and I said, I think it has some possibilities. But it actually turned out to be one of my favorite pictures, actually. So, and and that's it. These are kind of ordinary places, everyday places. But, our lives take place in these ordinary, I'm wondering how many people, I don't know, any one of these street scenes or something, somebody could have, proposed to somebody or, you don't know what happened. How many deer or whatever have gone through that creek or whatever. So that's what I do. It's hard to make a compelling deal out of just painting things that you see everywhere, but that's what I try to do. So I've jabbered enough. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I caught your class on Friday, and I'd never seen it before, and I was mesmerized. It was really fascinating to watch you do a piece in an hour. Wednesday.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I'm wondering, how big was that piece?
This size.
It was like square though, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it would have been about maybe a little smaller than what I did because it needed to be a square composition. But it doesn't mean anything to non-artists, but it's called a quarter sheet. You get the big sheet of paper, and then you either half it or quarter it, and work on that. This is about 2/3 of a full sheet, so a full sheet would be about to there. And when you're on location, it's not really practical to work that size. That's a studio piece. What with the wind and things drying and whatever, you have to work a little smaller. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing that on Wednesdays. That was kind of the thing that kept me sane through COVID, because we had to kind of cancel our regular classes that we have here. And I thought, well, let's everybody keep your hand in. I'll do this on Wednesdays, and we'll just,
I thought the photo that you picked was not interesting at all.
Well, that was the point of the lesson, is how to take a potentially good subject that has problems and kind of rework things, or leave out what doesn't work. Maybe accentuate something that will work. That kind of thing.
It was magic.
Oh, thank you. So.
Is that series still available?
Oh yeah, they're on my page, my Facebook page, and you just scroll back to find whichever one you want to watch. They're all different topics and subjects and things like that. So.
Just a comment. Picasso said, the more personal it is, the more universal it is. So your work is very universal.
Oh, thank you, David. So,
John, could you explain about is it a stamp or a...
oh, the odd little signature. Yeah. It's a Japanese script. As the industrial age came on and more Western words found their way into the Japanese language, they had to come up with additional letters and sounds to render the certain consonant combinations that they don't have but we have. And PR is one of them. So if a Japanese person would look at that, and it's meaningless as a word, but phonetically it sounds like Preston. So there was another connection. Do any of you remember Marty Taylor from the Off-Broadway Girl? Yeah. I had this little chop. It was carved into a walrus tooth that my father got in Japan after the war. And he gave that to me, and we had no idea whether it said Preston or whether it said, imperialist Yankee dog. So I had the thing, and I liked it because I used to not sign paintings on the front, because to me that's kind of like rolling the credits in the middle of the movie. So it's kind of unobtrusive, kind of like Whistler's Butterfly or whatever. So Marty came in contact with a Japanese artist or something, and she brought her out to our house, and I showed it to her, and she said, yeah, I mean, it's Preston, but first thing, you got it upside down. So I started in the corners of the margins of pictures, I started stamping it with an ink stamp, but being a natural material walrus ivory, I found out after time that whatever's in the stamp pad ink kind of dissolves the ivory, and it was starting to change, so I quit using that, and I learned how to do it with a brush. But just a fun thing. That's a good question, thanks. So, Joanne?
I see that only one is done in gouache. Are you switching your mediums or learning a new one?
I want to do more of that. It's on, all the rest of them are on a white sheet of paper. This is on a sheet of paper that's about the color of a brown paper bag. And then I take the regular watercolor and I mix a little Chinese white into it and do it opaquely. So I was kind of that, you know, like while we're waiting to get in after the judging, I was just experimenting, and I kind of like that. So I'm probably going to do more of that. It's tough to get around to too many new things. So.
You take the ordinary and make it extraordinary.
Oh, thank you.
And that's what we get to see.
Well, good. Because it's there, you know, it's a lot of times we just have to breeze on and get to wherever it is we're going, you know. So the other thing is some of these are what I kind of call whitey-tighty. Maybe a little too specific or something. And I'm feeling like I want to get a little more impressionistic or whatever, because I feel like the age, for me anyway, the age of the very large, considered, worked out, big painting that, you know, is to me that's done. Nowadays things just happen just like that, and you know, our life changes. You know, boom, we get a pandemic and everybody's life is thrown out of. They start a war in Ukraine, you know, it's just, you know, and you can't afford gas or whatever. It's nuts. So I feel like something more sketch-like is appropriate to our time period. So what I'm working for, or I'm trying to get, I think is something more, it's more like a quick sketch that you would make on location for a finished painting, but more complete. So that's kind of where it's going from here. It's just that when moments are so dramatic and changing like that, then they become a little more precious. And I think the impressionistic approach or the sketch approach sort of gets the feel of the moment, even if it doesn't get the, you know, major detail of this, that, or the other. So, good. Thank you. That's a good question.
It's more analogous to poetry, where you just hint at things, and then the bigger reality of it is created in the observer's mind.
That,
things out.
if we're lucky, that's what I love the idea of a painting being able to mean something to me, but maybe means something to someone else, you know, because then I'm just, you know, I'm gaining expressive power if it's not so locked into one particular thing. You know, like I was saying, I have no idea, maybe somebody on that street in Wisconsin, you know, maybe they proposed to each other, or that was where they had their honeymoon, or a very special moment to them. But to me, it was just a special moment of the illumination at that time of day. There's silhouettes, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's poetry is the older you get, the more you appreciate that kind of thing.
And also an example of Japanese haiku, you know, it's a certain number of lines. It's a very formal kind of structure, but yet it expresses infinity. You know, so many ways you can express reality in it. So it's very punchy because it's very concise, and like you say, the age we live in now just wants things to happen fast. They want the message to come right across and move on.
Yeah, I mean, 14 words or something. It's kind of like a verbal limited palette, you know.
And the analogy with painting, that would be interesting. What would it be, you know, a simple sort of formula that you go bang, you know. I don't know what it would be. But anyway, it's sort of what it sounds like, kind of what you're doing.
Well, maybe part of it is the fact that as a kid growing up, the only original art in our house was 2 Japanese brush drawings and a Japanese woodblock print. And then other than that, we had some poster reproductions of Toulouse-Lautrec and Degas. So I'm sure that kind of worked on me or something, and your first encounter with it.
What kind of watercolor paper and paint do you prefer, you feel is the best to work on?
Well, paper is the most important ingredient. Basically, you've got paint, a brush, and paper, and the water. And people tend to think that, well, the brush is the tool, and that must be the most important thing. And the paint, well, I want to have good paint so it doesn't fade or whatever. And then they go and get cheap paper, but they just think, well, I'm just practicing or something. You have to have a lot of experience to get a good result on a cheap paper. You need the best paper you can get your hands on. So 100% cotton, heavy, 140 pounds I like. There's several good brands. They're all European. For some reason, there is no good watercolor paper made in the United States, and there's no reason there couldn't be. We've got cotton, but 100% cotton, 140 pound. I like Saunders Waterford, it's an English paper. I like Fabriano, it's an Italian paper. They were making paper like 200 years before Columbus got to the New World. Arche, French paper maker, they're good. I like the English papers. Buy now, the pound is bad to the dollar. So, the watercolors, we do make good paint. There are great paint makers in the United States, several. And I like the ones from Oregon. They're called M. Graham. They have a very environmentally conscious manufacturer. They use wind power for their electricity. Most watercolor paints, they use glycerin as a humectant. M. Graham uses honey. They're one of 3 manufacturers that use honey, and they use locally sourced Oregon blackberry honey. And they wet very easily, and good paint, high pigment load. Brushes, boy, I tell you, there's no such thing as a bad brush. Every brush makes a particular mark, carries a certain amount of paint, and if that brush makes the mark you need at a particular time, it's the best brush in the world. But that said, I like squirrels, squirrel brushes. Some people are kind of allergic to brushes that are made out of animal hairs and things like that, but this isn't the time to give you my little soapbox thing on that, but your alternative is plastic, which means oil, and we own. Okay, so.
Can you just give us a brief little background about how you got into art? What inspired you?
How did I get into art? Well, I always drew as a kid. My earliest memory is drawing. But as I was explaining to someone else earlier, when we lived in Maryland, my dad took us to the National Gallery, and I was just thrilled with what we saw there. But you look at I would see the dates on the paintings, and it's 17 this and 18 that, and in 1964 to a 9-year-old or something, that means nothing. So, I guess I would have been 11. So I didn't think people did that anymore, right? I mean, we knew about Jackson Pollock, but we didn't think that, I don't know, wasn't what we were interested in. All through high school, I drew, I was big on airplanes, World War II airplanes. Then I drew beetles for people. when they had the Beetle cartoon. Does anybody remember that? It was a cartoon show. And then when I decided to go to school, I thought, well, it's art, let's see. And I had no idea what form that was going to take. I mean, it could have been abstract sculpture or something, you know, kind of like what they teach at the Maryland Institute or whatever. Big, large-scale things. And on the way out here, coming out in August, I saw the amazing thunderheads and late in the day and the big horizons, which you don't see if you live in the suburbs. And so I thought, okay, I want to try and paint that. And it went on from there. Well, thank you. Thanks.